Miami. Extra time. A striker who has already given his body for 2 hours steadies himself 6 yards out, waits for the goalkeeper to lose the ball, and buries it. England are through to a World Cup semi-final. His name is on every back page tomorrow morning. Then the manager walks up to a microphone and calls it lucky. That single mismatch, a young superstar carrying a team on his back, and a coach unimpressed by how he did it, is the thread running through England's entire 2026 World Cup campaign. It shows up again days later in Atlanta, in a tactical decision that would define the tournament, and in a post-match scuffle that had nothing to do with tactics at all. This is the story of how a team got closer to ending 60 years of hurt than it had in decades, and how the relationship between its manager and its best player kept fraying in public along the way. England have not won a men's major tournament since 1966. Every tournament cycle since has carried some version of the same question: is this the group that finally does it? In 2026, for the first time in years, the answer looked like it might be yes. A talented squad, a serious manager, and a run of knockout wins had the country believing again. But tournaments are not just won or lost on the scoreboard. They are shaped by trust, between a coach and his players, and especially between a coach and the player everyone is watching. When that trust is visibly strained on live television, in press conferences, and in the tactical choices made under pressure, it becomes part of the story whether anyone intends it to or not. What happened between Thomas Tuchel and Jude Bellingham over the course of 10 days in July 2026 is a case study in that tension, and it says something bigger about how modern international football is coached and covered. Thomas Tuchel took over as England manager on January 1, 2025, arriving with a reputation built at Chelsea, Bayern Munich, and Paris Saint-Germain. He signed an 18-month contract, structured deliberately around one target: the 2026 World Cup, co-hosted by the United States, Mexico, and Canada. England had reached the previous 2 European Championship finals under his predecessor, Gareth Southgate, and lost both. The brief for Tuchel was simple to state and hard to deliver: go one step further. Qualifying went about as well as it could. England won their group unbeaten, didn't concede a single goal across the campaign, and scored 20. That form was enough to convince the Football Association to move early. In February 2026, months before a ball was kicked at the tournament, the FA signed Tuchel to an extension through the end of Euro 2028, the tournament England will co-host with Wales, Scotland, and the Republic of Ireland. His coaching staff were extended on the same timeline. FA Chief Executive Mark Bellingham was explicit about the reasoning, with several major national teams about to lose their managers to free agency after the World Cup. Locking Tuchel down early meant England wouldn't be scrambling for a replacement in a crowded market. He also pointed to how the same approach had worked heading into the Lionesses and England under-21's own tournament wins. That contract detail matters more than it might first appear. It means that whatever happened in the United States that summer, Tuchel's job for the next 2 years was already secure. Whether that security shaped his caution in big moments is a fair question, and one his critics would ask loudly once the tournament reached its final stretch. England's route to the semi-final ran through a 2-1 extra time win over Norway in Miami on July 11. Bellingham scored both goals, an equalizer in first-half stoppage time and the winner 3 minutes into extra time, to send England through in searing, humid conditions that pushed both teams to their limits. What should have been a straightforward celebration turned complicated almost immediately. Speaking to ITV Pitchside minutes after the final whistle, Tuchel didn't lead with praise. He led with the mistakes, sloppy play, poor decision-making, a performance he said got lucky against a Norway side built around Erling Haaland, Martin Odegaard, and a well-organized defense. Bellingham heard about the comments second-hand, from a reporter, before he'd even left the pitch. His response, when it came, was 2 words. "Yeah, well, whatever." He added that the players had put in a very tough shift, and suggested, pointedly, that Tuchel, who never played top-flight football himself, hadn't experienced what the team had just been through on the field. that exchange might have stayed a one-day story. Instead, it became the opening chapter of something bigger that played out 4 days later in Atlanta. The semifinal against Argentina, the defending champions, was billed as the biggest match of Tuchel's tenure, a first World Cup final since 1966 within reach. Anthony Gordon put England ahead in the 55th minute. For a while, the 60-year wait looked like it might actually end. Then, in the 71st minute, Tuchel switched to a back five to protect the lead. The decision has been picked apart by almost every major pundit in English football since. In the 21 minutes that followed, England's possession collapsed to as low as 12%, and Argentina scored twice. Enzo Fernandez in the 85th minute, Lautaro Martinez with a header in stoppage time, to win 2-1. The reaction from former players turned pundits was immediate and largely unified. Jamie O'Hara, speaking on Sky Sports, called for Tuchel to be sacked on the spot, describing the tactical call as one of the worst I've ever seen. Chris Sutton labeled it a coaching catastrophe. Alan Shearer pointed to the sheer number of defensive substitutions, 6 defenders on the pitch at one stage, as evidence Tuchel had played his cards very early in the hope he could hang on. A gamble that backfired against a team with Argentina's quality. Gary Neville drew a direct comparison to England's Euro final defeat to Italy, saying the team had gotten too narrow and too deep at the exact moment it needed to keep the ball. Roy Keane's summary was simpler: Argentina had more quality in the moments that mattered, and the better team won. Tuchel didn't dispute the substance of the criticism. Speaking to the BBC afterward, he took full responsibility, acknowledging the switch had made his team passive at the exact moment they had everything to lose, while maintaining that the call had been his to make and he stood by the process even in defeat. The tactical debate might have been the whole story on its own. Instead, it collided with something that happened in the tunnel after the final whistle. Footage showed Bellingham striking Argentina substitute Valentín Barco on the back of the head, prompting a shove in return and a brief scuffle that drew in several players from both sides before England's goalkeepers helped separate everyone. Context emerged in the days that followed. Barco, an unused substitute who hadn't played a minute, had reportedly celebrated Argentina's equalizer directly in front of the England bench, and footage suggested he said something to Bellingham, who understands Spanish fluently from his years in La Liga, moments before the confrontation. Tension had been building for 90 minutes before that point. Bellingham had absorbed a heavy, unpunished challenge from Leandro Paredes earlier in the game, and had been the target of pointed goading from Argentine players throughout. The incident mattered for a very practical reason on top of the emotional one. FIFA had not yet ruled on it, which meant England's best player entered the following days uncertain whether he'd even be available for the third-place playoff against France. A real, immediate consequence layered on top of a heartbreaking defeat. Not everyone read the Norway comments, or Tuchel's overall approach, the same way Bellingham did. Wayne Rooney, working as a pundit, argued Tuchel had been right to criticize a below-par performance, framing it as a deliberate message to a team that would face much tougher opponents than Norway as the tournament went on. Kane, asked directly what Tuchel told the squad in the dressing room, said the message hadn't softened even in private. Congratulations paired with a clear sense that the team could still find another level, and chose to frame that as a positive going into the semi-final rather than a slight. Tuchel himself, for his part, later said he understood exactly why Bellingham had reacted the way he did, calling it a normal response from a player who'd just given everything his body had over 120 minutes. He said he'd addressed the full squad afterward and moved the conversation forward. So the picture by mid-July wasn't a simple story of a manager against his star. It was 3 or 4 different, defensible readings of the same week, running in parallel, none of them fully resolving the underlying tension. England lost the semi-final. The FA's response, reported within days, was that nothing about Tuchel's position would change. He remained contracted through Euro 2028, and sources indicated the federation's backing was unaffected by the result. Bellingham called the defeat heartbreaking while making clear the FA's loyalty hadn't moved. Tuchel, asked directly whether Atlanta had changed his plans, said he was staying the course, while acknowledging it was hard to look that far ahead in the moment. Not everyone in English football accepted that outcome quietly. The volume of the O'Hara-Sutton-Shearer Neville criticism made clear that a significant part of the football media didn't think a semi-final exit, however painful the manner, should be treated as acceptable, contract or no contract. Meanwhile, the team still had a match to finish, a third-place playoff against France in Miami, a fixture nobody in that dressing room particularly wanted, arriving on top of both the disappointment of the semi-final and the unresolved question of whether Bellingham would even be free to play in it. Zoom out, and the through-line is clear. Tuchel arrived in January 2025 promising to finish a job Southgate couldn't. He got England further than they'd been in years, a semi-final, a first in nearly a decade, while absorbing serious criticism for how it ended. Bellingham, meanwhile, proved twice in the space of 10 days that he will say exactly what he thinks the moment he disagrees, whether that's dismissing a manager's criticism in one word or getting pulled into a post-match confrontation minutes after a tactical collapse he had no part in. Both men are contracted, in one form or another, to the same project through 2028, a home European Championship that England will host alongside Wales, Scotland, and the Republic of Ireland. Whether the gap between how Tuchel manages and how Bellingham plays closes by then, or widens into something that actually costs England a tournament, is the question hanging over the next 2 years. For now, English football is left exactly where it has been for 60 years, closer than it's been in a long time, and still waiting.